Hello and welcome to the Microbehunter Microscopy podcast. My name is Oliver Kim. Hi, my name is Oliver Kim, and I'd like to welcome you to the Microbehunter Microscopy podcast. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, I have to admit. I could not think of a better name, but in any case, it doesn't matter. Who cares? The point is of this podcast is to give beginners some basic advice in starting amateur microscopy. I myself have been doing amateur microscopy for around 20 years now, and if you include the toy microscopes that I got when I was 6 years old, well, then I've been doing it for a much longer time now. In any case, I've been doing microscopy as a pastime and as a hobby, but because I'm also a biology teacher for high school and middle school, it's also be a little bit somewhat of my job, because we do use microscopes also in school and in education. And for this reason, I'm also seeing, of course, that aspect of microscopes. Now, I have started I think it was in 2008 or 2009, I started the Microbehunter blog. And then later on, I also started the Microbehunter magazine, which is a PDF, an online free PDF magazine, in which people send me articles that are microscopy related, and I format them and I make them available for download. And this has been going quite well, and now I decided to expand a little bit on that, and I am now also going to try a podcast series. But there's one thing that I almost forgot to tell you. I mean, there is also a blog. It's the microscopy blog, microscopy-forum.com, which will redirect you to the blog. Did I say blog? To the forum. And in this forum, it's a very active community in which you can ask many questions and in which you can contribute. So I highly recommend that you also visit that forum. Okay, let's get started. In any case, in this very first episode, I want to talk about a little bit what amateur microscopy actually is. Many folks who are interested in microscopy have only a very vague idea on what you can actually observe using microscopes. But I want to start even more general here, because it's not only the use of microscopes that characterizes an amateur microscopist, but there are also some other activities that are involved. And in this episode, I just want to give you a general overview. Okay? So, and then I'd like to later talk a little bit about the advantages of microscopy as a hobby, because I think it's a pretty cool hobby. So, let's get started here. Well, of course, amateur microscopists, what they like to do is they like natural observation. We collect pond water samples, we put them under the microscope, and we observe the life that's there. It's simply fun seeing things that are there in our environment that we cannot see with our unaided eye. And so in that sense, amateur microscopy, or microscopy in general, it kind of expands our horizons a little bit. Okay, we tend to see the world a little bit differently. We tend to see the world through different eyes to a certain extent. And when I just a few days ago, I removed something from a balcony, a piece of cloth from a balcony, which I placed there some years ago to protect us from other people actually looking into the balcony, some kind of a shield, a vision protection. And I discovered there was a lot of green stuff on one corner. Okay, these were photosynthetic organisms, and the first thing that I did is I had to collect them and I had to put it under the microscope. Yeah. Because I think it's kind of interesting and cool to see these things under the microscope. That's simply fun, right? So that's the one thing, natural observation. The second thing that some folks like to do, I'm not so much into that. Some folks like to collect microscopes, especially antique microscopes. They're very nice, brass ones. They look very artistic. And some folks also like to collect more modern microscopes. Okay, so that is microscope collecting. Is indeed one aspect of amateur microscopy. So those folks not only collect them, they clean them, they refurbish them, they maintain them. Okay, so you have a little museum. Probably not the cheapest interpretation of the hobby. Okay, because some of these are really valuable collector's items, quite rare devices. So it's not one of the cheapest interpretations of the hobby. Okay, I'll move on. Some folks like to go more into the lab aspect, and they like specimen preparations. They like to make specimen slides. This requires a certain skill and knowledge, also in sample preparation. Sooner or later, if you're a little, everyone's pretty much going to go into specimen preparation unless you want to observe ready-made slides, which is also fine. If you just want to do some natural observation, sooner or later everyone's going to do some specimen preparation. But there are some folks who are taking the whole thing a step further, and they're making permanent slides which really can last for a very long time, and they require quite an extensive and elaborate specimen preparation. Okay. Historical slide collecting, that's also one of those things that can be a little bit more expensive, because some of those historical slides, they have a high value. Especially in the 19th century, there were some microscope slide makers that were really spending a lot of time and energy into these things, and they are now collector's items. There are actually separate websites dedicated to that hobby. A slightly different approach. Some people might already have an existing hobby, like for example stamp collecting or mineral collecting, and if you have then a so-called a stereo microscope, then this expands or adds another dimension to an already existing hobby, because observing your own stamps or minerals or insects, for that sense, under a stereo microscope is quite interesting. Okay. A little bit not quite as common as in amateur telescope making, because many years ago I've also been into amateur astronomy. I've not made my own telescope yet, but I know from that time that there are quite a lot of people out there who like to make their own telescopes. This is not very common. It's not common to make microscopes, okay? And one of the reasons is because it's almost impossible for a person to make your own good microscope optics. We simply don't have the tools. There are some folks who actually did that, and they tried to replicate the very first microscopes by actually making their own microscope lenses. That is possible. You can also buy relatively cheaply microscope objectives, and then you can build the rest of the microscope around it. But I probably would say it's not a very common one. But I myself have been a little bit involved, because I tried to make a microscope out of Lego. And in my blog, you have actually reported back on that. So I bought myself the optics, and I simply built a Lego microscope around it. And it works. What shall I say? Why shouldn't it work? It's basically built a box around an objective, right? That's what I did. It was quite fun. You can read up on my blog a little bit. Something that I also tried some years ago is the drawing of specimens. That's a little bit more the artistic side of the hobby. And still it is not outdated. I have to be very honest with you. Some people saying, well, drawing, do you really have to do that nowadays? We've got all the photographs and the digital cameras that you can connect to the microscope. Is drawing really still something that is necessary? And I'm saying yes, and I probably will be also into the future. And the reason is not that the current cameras are not good enough. Okay, that's not the point. The point is that drawing allows you to combine different images into one typical drawing. I don't know how I shall say that. Let's say if you want to draw a cell for a book, for an identification book, let's say, or some other specimen. Often it is like this, that the pictures that you get under the microscope are not as nice looking as a drawing, for the reason that there is a lot of dust that you see. Some parts are out of focus, so it is not, and sometimes due to the sample preparation, some of the cells are also a little bit destroyed. Okay, so it's not always like this that you always will get a perfect picture by using photographs. And so what you do is you observe many different specimens of the same type, and then you kind of make an ideal drawing of that. Okay, this also allows people who are, for example, making scientific drawings or who are making identification books to make sure that all of the drawings have the same style. Okay, they have all the same. It looks more uniform in design. Okay, and so this is the reason why I think it's not going to be like this, that drawing specimens will be ever completely outdated. And last but not least, we just talked about photographs. Yes, of course, there are also competitions about microphotography. No, this was wrong. Microphotography is actually a wrong term. You have to say photomicrography. That is the correct one. Okay, microphotography is actually not right. Okay, it's a photomicrograph is a picture taken through a microscope. And if you say a microphotograph, then this is a picture, a photograph which is too small to be seen. It's a microscopic photograph. So it's, yeah, we've got to be careful here, but I know that's a little bit not so relevant right now. Okay, so yeah, why do I like microscopy a lot? First of all, I just want to talk about a couple of advantages here. One of the advantages is you can do it at home. It's really nice. You don't need to go anywhere. All you need is you need some kind of a table with that you can work on. It doesn't even have to be a big table. It can be just a relatively small one, as long as it is stable. You don't need much time. You feel like looking at something, you just turn on the microscope. And you can do this relatively quickly. And you don't have to go anywhere. Okay, you don't have to. There's not a lot of overhead that you need to take care of before you can actually start doing the hobby. Theoretically, you can take it along. So you go on a holiday trip somewhere and you have your own little travel microscope. That's a possibility. So especially if you're interested in natural observation and you're, I don't know, visiting a new place. For the summer holidays, I'm going to go to the beach. So it would be kind of nice to have a small microscope there to, let's say, observe the water life in the ocean a little bit. And then, because I don't want to take the samples back home, I can connect a camera to it or a digital phone camera and then take pictures. That's a possibility. You're not dependent on good weather. That is also a big advantage. The place where I live, when I did some of my amateur astronomy, we didn't always have clear skies. I have to be very honest here. Okay, and that is at least an advantage here, that you are somewhat weather independent. Okay. Personalization, that means there are so many sub-branches of amateur microscopy, so that you can, if you look around a little bit, you can find your own how shall I say, area of interest here. Okay, be it the natural observation or photography or drawing or collecting or whatever. Yeah, so that's of course one thing. So there are many opportunities here. It's relatively easy to start. That's another cool thing. You can teach yourself the basics of microscopy, so there are the skills required are not very high. I, for example, am trying to teach myself. I'm actually taking lessons as well. I'm playing guitar. That's a skill that actually requires, I would say, if you want to do it properly, you need a teacher to tell you what you're actually doing wrong, so that you don't get into any wrong habits. Now, in that sense, microscopy is relatively easy because, you watch a couple of YouTube videos that explain you how to use the microscope properly, and off you go. It's not really difficult. You can specialize yourself. So there are some amateur microscopists who, when doing natural observation, they are interested in specific organisms only. Certain protozoa, whatever, certain algae, and they can become real experts in that field. That's going a little bit more than into the research area. And you are not dependent on other people. It's relatively an independent hobby. You don't need to make an appointment with someone else because it's not like in team sports, for example, where you have fixed appointments because several people have to find time free to do that hobby. In that sense, it's an independent hobby. And that can also be a disadvantage, I have to be very honest, because it is so independent. Sometimes I feel that there is not a lot of personal networking going on unless you have some kind of web forums or something like that. Because you're not forced to meet up to do microscopy. It can be a little bit a lonely hobby. Okay, that is. It doesn't have to be, but you see, other hobbies do have the advantage. You got to meet up other people in order to do the hobby. Okay, if you want to play sports, team sports, you got to meet up other people. Okay, in microscopy, it's too easy. You don't have to do that. You just at 12:30 at night, I just want to look at a few more specimens before I go to bed. I do that, and I look at a couple of specimens and I enjoy them and I think they're kind of cool and they look nice. I take a few pictures. And then I go to bed. I'm kind of alone, right? And so that is a disadvantage here, really. And in that sense, I once mentioned that in one of my blog articles, I mentioned that the life of a microscopist, that's a little bit sometimes like a lone wolf, There are microscopy clubs around, of course, but because I think there are not that many around, because there is really no need for other people, for you to pair up with someone, okay, or to team up. And I think this is one of the reasons why some of the web forums are this popular nowadays, because it does allow you to connect to other people over a long distance. Okay, so I don't know. I've been talking now 15 minutes, more or less freely. Yeah, I'll just say that I'll call it a day for now. I wish you all the best, and yeah, we'll see where this podcast is going to take me. Okay, and all the best. Have a nice day.